Hey guys, welcome to this tutorial for QuickCurve. I have a video on my channel already covering one of the older QuickCurves and all of the basic settings, all the hotkeys, how to work with QuickCurve. So this video is going to be more about just a few time lapses. I'll just talk about some of the logic behind working with QuickCurve, and then towards the end I'll get into real-time demos of what the new features are. There's like 4 or 5 new good things. And so here you're just seeing me draw. Basically, QuickCurve is like grease pencil kind of, but you already have a 3D curve object that you can extrude and cut in Boolean and do all of those things because it's just geometry automatically. So it's kind of taking away the step of conversion. And that's pretty much the basis of it. You can switch through brushes, and here you see I started with like just little line drawing, and then I'm increasing the brush size and doing like the flat part. So you can do a bit. That's one of the things that I really want to cover with this video, is that you can do so many different things with it. Like you can draw a building, you can draw characters, you can draw later on. I do a car. I do environments. Here I switched from the square to the round, and I started doing some little details. It's really not possible to do this with the regular curve drawing, because to even switch from a round to a square or to change the brush size or the curve size is just so time consuming. This was the first scene that I put together. So here I'm switching it up, and now I'm drawing a car. The way I like to think about it is I can draw anything in QuickCurve that I can draw from a side view or a front view or a top view, and then I can just extrude it down or scale the curve down into the other dimension, kind of like how Scott Robertson would draw a car. So here I'm just like mirroring over to the other side. Here I'm going from I just messed up some of the settings there, but here, once I got the mirror right, I drew this from the top view because it makes more sense to start from there and then just move it up and down. Here I'm drawing from the side view and then extruding it out. So I hope that makes sense, and you kind of see what I'm saying there. It's all about just finding the right angle to do your drawing from. Are you drawing from the front or the side or the top? At least when it comes to working with QuickCurve. Adding a little further detail here, stuff. Using the eraser. The eraser got a new improvement. The whole drawing system just looks a little better now. It's using like a new visual thing. Here I'm drawing the curve for the loft. So if you watch the QuickDeform video, you can loft curves now. So that's what I did there. And this is a good example of like, that's a shape that you can't draw in side view because it's so three-dimensional. So I can just draw the curve and then move it around and loft it. I think we're just about done with this car here. Yeah. So here I'm showing one of the new features, which is Voxel Modeling. So you can go into the Control D menu, and there's a little voxel resolution setting and a smooth setting. If you turn that up, basically every curve that you draw will be remeshed and smoothed, depending on if the settings are active. And the nice thing about that is that it's all kind of live. So you can move the curves after the fact. You'll see it's all remeshing kind of at once. And this is basically the 3D coat workflow just in Blender, which I vastly prefer. You can get all of the advantages of Blender, which is like you can move the objects without having to look at layers and think about layers. All the objects are just kind of in the scene and everything's separate. But at the same time, it helps to be able to visualize everything connected, especially for organic characters. But I've also used the voxel modeling workflow for hard surface, for environments. It's kind of useful for anything really. So here I just drew this little character. Now I'm just taking advantage of the fact that I can move stuff and see everything come together, getting everything right. Almost done with this. Started on the next one. So for this character, I just turned off the voxel modeling workflow and I'm just drawing it out in a front view. Really simple. And then I'm just grabbing the curves and positioning them in 3D. Getting something, it's like a base. You can always go in and remesh it and inflate it, sculpt on top, or you can replace it with a rigged character. But it's always nice to just have something like this in the scene in like 3 minutes. You can have just a little sketchy concept. So here I'm using that same voxel modeling workflow for an environment. Basically, the way that it works is if you have selected an object that is already voxelized, it will join into that family. But if I were to deselect everything in the scene, then it would create a new family that doesn't connect with the other one. And then so based on what is selected, that's what will be joined together. By joined together, I mean remesh together. And you can use the little helper in QuickDeform to apply the voxel modeling object, which will basically just join everything together and remove all of the unnecessary things in the scene. We redesigned the custom object workflow from scratch. So one of the things that you can do now with this new system is, as you saw in the Control D menu, you set the mesh array offset to 0. And basically what this is going to do is just stretch the custom object that you're drawing with completely along the curve, as opposed to arraying it multiple times. So what that opens the door for is basically drawing with an object as a custom brush. And here I'm just making a little environment with that. As you change the size, you can see it orients along the curve. As you change the size with F, it's just going to increase the overall size. And then Control G, the depth, is going to be the thing that basically extrudes it up and down or affects the scale of it on the Z axis. So that's the environment that I ended up with. So here I'm using the same idea, but instead of taking the mesh array offset to 0, I'm keeping it at 1, which is basically just going to array it. So I ended up making a couple little rocks here, and that's going to scatter along the curve. You just want to make sure that you get this setting right. It's very important, this draw on surface, only on selected surface. So with that off, it doesn't matter what I've selected. It will just draw on whatever object it finds under my cursor. So here I'm just drawing a bunch of rocks. It's kind of like just a very artistic way to scatter some objects. And again, you can get all the variation based on size and your scale. Here I'm doing the copy materials from active thing. So I have that object with an emissive material on it, and then I turn that on, and now I'm basically drawing fire, a little torch. So this is the last scene that I put together. And now we're going to switch over to the real-time stuff. Wanted to switch back to real-time and go more in depth on the custom mesh, because that's a really useful feature, a really powerful one. And actually, before I even do that, I also want to point out this draw only on selected. As I mentioned earlier in the video, it's really important. Sometimes when you're detailing objects, you don't want anything to get in the way. You just want to draw on something specific. Just keep that in mind. That's a useful setting. So now let's get back to custom. So when you select an object, you press J, it'll get sent to the origin, and then you can just draw. So this is actually you can replace the square brush and the circle brush with this, and this gives you a few advantages that I'll show in a bit. But the thing that I wanted to point out first, let's do it on the monkey. That's a little more obvious. J, so we set the monkey. When we draw, so we can go into edit mode. Like, it'll automatically be snapped to the ground, and the orientation that it expects is facing -y. But you can change this. You know, maybe you want it to be oriented like this. Maybe you don't want it on the ground, you want it like that. Then you can just draw, and you'll see that this is how it's gonna pop out. Now the monkey head is always gonna be facing you. Size a little bit. Another thing that is important is that you can go to edit mode and draw just like regular curves, just like I covered in the old samurai video. Then, like I was mentioning, you can use something like the cylinder that's like this to do a round brush kind of thing. So instead of just drawing with the round and square brush here, you can use a cube, for example, as your custom mesh, and now you draw. Or you can use a cylinder oriented this way to draw a round brush. And there's some key differences here. This the custom mesh way offers a few advantages, and basically it just means that you can use this offset feature. So if we turn that down, there will be some spacing there. That's all that one does. If you actually set it to 0, then you're going to get the effect that I showed in the rock demo. Let's do monkey. So basically, it's going to stretch. Instead of arraying it, it's just going to stretch the object along the whole curve. This is really, really cool. And then there's another thing, which is deform along curve. There it is, deform custom by curve. So if you have it on, you'll notice that it flows along. But if you do this, it'll just be like a straight up array, so you don't get any of the deformation. And again, this works with the array offset if you get some different type of spacing. I think this feature usually works better when you're using the spacing works better when you have deform off. It just kind of makes more sense. But you can do any type of combination you want, and everything will work. Now the next thing that I wanted to show that's new is the wraparound object. Reset everything. So if we press Alt-Shift-W, and depending on this draw only on selected option, if that's on, and you draw like this, it will wrap around the object. So it doesn't do like a double wrap because it's not selected. If you were to do this, you can see it goes around. And the cool thing is that this works on anything. So with the square brush, it'll work. And the wraparound mode works with custom objects. So let's do this here. Let's create a monkey. Sure that our array offset is 1. It can be whatever, but just for the sake of demo, use the monkey. And now with wraparound object on, if we draw, it will wrap around using that array. So this opens the door to a lot of possibilities, a lot of really cool detailing things, and even just as a modeling thing, you can kind of do some stuff. can also use a Bezier curve as a profile for your custom object. So when you press J, it'll try and align it, and then as you draw, it'll just extrude that profile along the curve. And you might want to go in here and go in edit mode and see, because I can't know exactly what you want, but it gets you close enough, and then you can do the rest. And now one thing that's cool is if you watch the QuickDeform video, you would know these settings here. So the guides menu here with the smoothing amount and the snapping angle. And these are just a couple shortcuts so you don't have to manually mess with the slider. So for snapping angle, it's kind of like lazy Nezumi, where it will draw, it'll stick to the angle. So you can do like hard surface design like this. Cool. And other thing is smoothing amount, which again, like lazy mouse, Nezumi, let's do a nice. Get nice curves that are smooth there. But that's again through the QuickDeform menu. We also reimagined the resolution setting. So now curve resolution is what this setting here. So if you turn that up, you'll see that this is at 12. If you turn this down, see that it's at 1, and that difference becomes apparent once you convert it to a mesh. You can see there's way less points here. The other thing, brush resolution. And this kind of is just like a very slight resampling that really only matters when you do a lot of corners. So let's turn it on 1. Draw that. And we'll turn it on 3. Basically, you see that 3 is like more accurate. Even though the points are kind of similar, this one stuck to the original shape a little more, whereas this one kind of tried to smooth it out a little more. But like I said, with corners, you can't really smooth out corners, so it gets a little tricky there. So that's why 2 is a really great value there, and you can just kind of keep it at 2. If you find that it's not sticking exactly to what you're drawing, then that's when you might want to go and change it to 3. And the reason we want a good amount of points is because of the feature in QuickDeform, which is the grab. You want to be able to do this kind of movement. It's really nice. So you get the like sculpt mode functionality, the proportional edit functionality, but without having to go into any other mode. You just go right back into drawing. So the last thing I want to cover in this QuickCurve tutorial is drawing with materials. And I had some videos, some time lapses, and people are always asking on how to set this up, and it's actually really simple. So first let's demonstrate this by material. We'll just put in a texture here, just default Blender stuff here. This texture. Let's change the scale. Okay, so Blender, when you draw a curve, it comes with UVs. So when you're using QuickCurve and you have a curve from that, you can link these materials and you will have texture on them. But what we did is we have this little checkbox here, material from active. So all this does is if you have an object selected, this is your active object that you draw, it will just do that process for you automatically. So it will just link the material. And you can scale here, and there you go. So now you're drawing like stone. Switch to this, you're drawing more sense. Round. You're drawing like stone wall. But you'll see, here's the issue. It's all kind of linked to the orientation of the curve. So if you start doing this, it gets weird. It works well when you're doing this. Now, if you make this material with quick texture, so for example, Control T, bring in the same material, and then you Control F, you've got materials from active. It will be fixed because this is using the special quick texture procedural setup at the modifier level. So now it's not using the object's UVs. And the reason that setting is here in quick texture. If you want more information on this force procedural thing, just watch the quick texture tutorial. But basically, once you have that set up, as long as you have the object selected, you can draw with it and you will have the material. That's how I did the wooden planks in the old quick texture video, and I use this feature all the time. This is really cool. And this works for material from active. This can also work for the other setting in there was modifiers from active. So that's just, let's say you, just as an example, it's maybe not the most useful, but you have a subdivision surface, turn on modifiers from active, and the curve will now have subdivision as long as this was selected. So that's just how those two things work. Modifiers from active can be useful, but materials from active, absolutely useful, really cool. I haven't seen it in any other program or add-on where you can draw with materials, but I think it's just awesome.